Hi, I'm Lisa Jackson from Sew It Saturday. A lot of times I get questions on what you would need to buy to get started sewing. A lot of people are interested in it, but they are understandably overwhelmed when you walk into a fabric or a big box craft store. There's a lot of stuff out there. I want to give you some feedback based on my experience on what you would need to buy without going through a lot of expense. This is my sewing area, and as you can see, it's a little messy, and I wanted it that way so that you know this is what it should look like. Whatever you see on Instagram with the cute little pictures looking out over a beach or whatever, it's not really accurate. You're going to accumulate a lot of stuff. So take your time in the beginning and make sure that what you're buying are things that you're going to use. So these are things I again have learned in my experience that would help you and may not be apparent. The first thing I would do if I was going to start sewing at the very beginning is figure out your home store. So there are big box craft stores around me. There are quilting shops. There are places that really specialize with clothing or high-end fabric, Home Deck, for example. Figure out where that home store is. Not only do you get coupons, reward programs, but you're going to have skilled staff there that can help you when you have questions, and you will have questions. A lot of the big box places have more inexperienced people. And so part of paying a little bit more to go to a quilting store or go to a Home Deck store is that you have people that know what they're talking about. And that's going to be really, really important because you're going to get a lot of conflicting information. Ideally, and this is a reach, but it would be great if that store also arranged service on your sewing machines. And I say machines because if you start sewing, you start buying machines, and I know this firsthand. So your machines will need service. You will want to upgrade. And again, you want an experienced person to help you with that. And that's what those specialty fabric stores or sewing places provide you. And it will cost a little bit more. So know that going in. The second thing is to figure out a separate space. Many sewing accessories are sharp or they're magnetic, which is not good for phones and other electronic equipment. And you want to protect your family from those things. You also want to protect your work from your family. I'm a mom of 3. Nothing is more interesting than what mom is looking at right now and trying to focus on, and little hands are going to go for the sharpest thing they can find. And this machine, the most interesting thing in the world. So they're going to push every button. So a closet, a corner of a room, just someplace that you can, again, protect your work and that you don't have to put, ideally, everything away, even if you can kind of roll everything up and shove it in a drawer. But so much of this is prepping your space for work and then putting it all away, that any corner of a room that you can claim as your own would be helpful. One more thing is a big table. A lot of people, and for most of my 30 years, I have used a dining room table, and that's fine as long as you can remember to pick up all your pins, which is another challenge, but I'll get to that a little bit later. But again, so a home store, separate space may not occur to you, but it'll make your life a lot easier. And as you can see, I have a lot of junk here, and this is just a small amount of things that you will start to accumulate as you start to sew. One thing to remember when you're buying accessories, because there's a lot of fun stuff out there, is to think about what type of sewing you plan to do, and that's going to make these choices a lot easier. So the first thing that you're going to do is measure, and you need to think about, what am I measuring? If you're doing small pieces of fabric, a little kid's ruler with inches and centimeters, 99 cents at best, you can probably grab this from a kid for free, will get you through a whole lot of stuff, particularly when you're starting to sew. You don't need to measure things until you know what you need to measure, right? So just start with the easy stuff. I always recommend these little rulers, because you will use them, you will rely on them very heavily. If you're going to sew clothing, you will need to measure round things or curvy things like hips and, chest size and stuff like that. So maybe 99 cents, a tape measure. This will come in handy. Invest in this one. Pretty much either way, you'll just use it more if you're going to do clothing. And you'll eventually do like Halloween costumes, which I do, even though I don't do clothing. But you'll get to a place where you need to measure something that's not flat. This is where this comes in handy. I do a home dec, and so I measure bigger things. A yardstick is great. You see this has a sewing store emblem on it. Sometimes they give it away for free. So, you know, again, a familiar refrain here is how cheap can I get it until you want to invest in something nice, because there are so many cool things that you'll want to invest in. Don't waste it with this stuff. You know, with the easy things that you can do for free, do it that way. You'll next need to, so you're measuring, you'll next need to mark. So you might need to mark a seam allowance, where a button is going to go or whatever. I am always old school and cheap. I'll say frugal. So I use a pencil and Kids Chalk. It gets me through 90%. When you need to be more precise, I don't quilt. So I don't always need to be super precise, and I don't do clothing. So those things, you may need to invest in fabric marking pens. And this is Friction, which I've told is great. I just don't use it very often, but a lot of people swear by them. These you can mark, and when you iron them, the marking goes away. And these are a little pricey, but if you're gonna go that way, you know, invest in this. The next thing that you do after you've measured and you're marked, you're gonna need to cut. And this is where you need to invest a little bit. This are fabric shears. It's flat, so you can, you know, cut fabric on a flat surface. So look for this, and it should feel a little heavy, right? These are Fiskars, but just, you know, a good name, and they should cost a little more. If you pick up a pair of scissors, it's very lightweight, but it's a super great price. You're just gonna buy another pair of scissors. Don't waste your time. You try to find a good one, and you're gonna cut a lot, so these ergonomic kind of handles are gonna save your wrist. The next type of scissors that's maybe not be evident are little snippets. These have a lot of different forms, but they're just for thread. You're going to be cutting thread very close to your seam, so that, you know, it looks nice when you give it to somebody. So buy a pair of snippers and leave it by your sewing machine. You're always going to be looking to see where you left this. Put it near your sewing machine and don't let it travel around. There are two optional things once you start sewing a little bit more. And I've started to use this because it's easier on my hand and it's more accurate. But quilters, I think, go this route more often. And that is a rotary cutting wheel. So if you want to do a square 11 by 8 or 2 by 3, this will be very precise, and you do it on a cutting mat. This cutting mat is also nice to just lay down when you're trying to measure things and make sure they're right or on a straight edge. So this is something that with the holidays coming up, if you have a wish list or whatever, you might want to ask for this. This is going to save your wrist a lot when you start cutting and sewing, and it gets very precise. I wasn't a fan of this at first, but I've been won over. they are kind of cool. So the last thing that's kind of optional for cutting are pinking shears. When you're using woven fabric, they are going to fray. So you could possibly use your sewing machine to use a finishing edge, you know, around it, kind of prep the unfinished edges, the cut edges. Or I opt for pinking shears. If somebody looks inside your seam, they're just going to see the little zigzag kind of cut on it. It looks nicer, and it helps woven fabrics not fray. So you have measured, you've marked, and you cut, and now you get to the fun stuff, and you're going to sew. So to sew, there are some things that you're going to need. And the first thing you have to do when you sew is unsew, and you will unsew a whole lot. So I have 5 of these. I have them in every surface. They are cheap. It's a seam ripper. And when I sew something wrong, just, you know, acknowledge it, rip it out, and start over. Don't lament it or whatever. You know, it happens. I have sewn every way possible wrong. I've done it. So sewing is so easy to undo on most fabrics. So just get as many seam rippers as you can and put them everywhere and just go for it. You know, if you make a mistake, rip them out. This rips out very quickly. You might want to get, you know, if you're doing home dec, maybe a bigger seam ripper in different sizes, but seam rippers are first and foremost. You will need pins or clips. Again, old school because pins are cheap, and I just use a magnet to pick them back up because you're going to drop them. Some people use clips, which those are really nice. I just haven't invested in them. I definitely think it's a very cool idea, much safer than pins, but eventually I'll get there. But there are clips, I think they're called Wonder Clips, that you can buy probably in different manufacturers that are also safer and probably hold your fabric better than these pins. And the last thing you will need is thread. And this is again something that not evident, but don't buy cheap thread. It will put a lot of lint in your machine. Your seams won't hold up. They won't look as nice, which gets more and more important. If you're giving gifts, you want it to look nice. And buy big spools of black and white. You'll go through a lot of black and white thread, and buy some in colors. When you are new and you start to sew, if you're sewing something that is green and you're using white, if your seams don't look good, it is going to scream, "Look at me." It looks nicer when your threads match, but another great thing is that it also hides less than perfect seams. So wherever your thread can match, both for professionalism and to hide your mistakes, do that. A lot of times they have great thread sales at big box stores. Pick a manufacturer, whatever one you want, and try to accumulate things in as many colors as you can. That's going to come handy. And then the very last thing that we have is your sewing machine. So I recommend buying a basic machine. If you can buy one, it would be great. My suggestion is be very wary of buying a used machine. If there is a problem with it, the cost of repair is usually the cost of a new basic machine. So if you have a good machine and you know the person who owned it, then great, and they want to give it to you, then awesome. But a lot of times you buy a machine thinking it's a deal, and then you put more money into it than you would if you just bought a basic machine. The great thing about buying a basic machine too is when I have crappy fabric, like I want to sew fake fur, I can save my better machine and just use the basic machine. That it's not like I don't care about it, but it's a less of an investment if there's a problem. If it hits a hard surface and the needle breaks or whatever, I'm less concerned about it. So buy a basic machine. You can get one for under $100 and use that to learn to sew, because you are going to make mistakes and you're going to break your needle and you're going to drop pins where you don't expect to. Make that kind of your training machine. And then when you know what type of sewing you want to do and you invest in a more expensive machine, you have a backup machine when that one goes in for service, or again, you're using a fabric that you really don't want to use your good machine on. And for a lot of people, the basic machine will handle all your sewing. If you're not doing specialty fabrics or anything particularly daunting, basic machine will last you a long time. They are really good and great for beginner sewers at great prices. So I've gone through a lot of things, and I try to keep these short, but it's so much information, and I'm really excited that you're learning how to sew. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Sew What Saturday is on Facebook, Instagram, and it's sewwhatsaturday.com. You can email me, sewwhatsaturday@gmail.com anytime. Wish you well in your sewing journey ahead of you, and wish you the very best luck. So on and so forth, and thanks for joining me today.